Hey, it's Todd Daniele, and today I'm going to work within Zbrush and 3D Studio Max to make a octopus arm, also known as a tentacle. Well, I call it tentacle. Everyone I spoke to call it tentacle. Technically, it's not called a tentacle. But what we're going to make is this kind of arm. This is not my image, obviously. We see where it comes from, Shutterstock. I'm just using it as a reference. So yeah, this is an octopus arm. We're going to use this reference just as a guide for like a pose, proportions of the suckers as far as the diameters, how far up on the side wall of the arm they go, things like that. So this reference tells us a lot about what we're going to build. So what we're going to do is build one section with two suckers, and we're going to actually combine it here in ZBrush, and we're going to remesh it using ZRemesher. I think we could probably get a result that's good enough as a base to bring into Max, and then we'll tile it, make like a bunch of them. And then we're also in Max, on the Max side of things, once we have it blocked out, we're going to tile it, attach it. It's going to be not in a position like this. It's going to be neutral, so it's going to be one straight line. Neutral for a humanoid would be an A or a T. For this particular, just the arm, we're going to make it a straight line, and it's also not going to taper or twist like this when it's neutral. So we're going to have something that kind of looks like a cylinder with a bunch of little cylinders coming off the bottom. And we're going to use path to form in order to pose it. And path to form does have some control for twist and things like that, but in my experimenting, I did not like the way it reacted. So we're going to use modifiers like twist and taper with an FFD to taper the end of the arm and adjust the size of the suckers as we taper it. And finally, obviously, path to form, we're going to use some noise to add some kind of organicness to it. And I think we'll have, at the end of this short tutorial, we should have a good overview of how you could build this even more detailed than I will. And also how you can build it with I think the loops are going to look pretty decent out of ZRemesher and the way I put it together. But if you wanted this for like a feature film or something, you might want to spend a little more time on cleaning up the mesh than I'm going to. But at any rate, I'm showing you a really editable, sort of parametric, I would put that in quotes, way to make this arm. And the good thing is once you have the base arm in its neutral position and we use path to form, you'd be able to make 8 separate arms in different poses. And possibly there might be some bonus footage where we're going to actually take the spline that this follows and just do some simple keyframes just to show that you could, if you wanted to, make a simple animation without having to rig this. So with all that said, I gave myself 1 hour of R&D time to come up with a technique. And the reason I'm doing this tutorial is I had a discussion with a good friend, Dante, a couple weeks ago, and he was saying that he's working on a personal project, and he didn't want to just simply brute force the model in a position and just be locked to what he had. And he's like, do you think you have any ideas? And I said, yeah. I said, actually, I'd like to do a tutorial on it. And here we are. So special thanks to Dante Levidini, great illustrator, great 3D artist. And let's get started. Okay, so we have the reference. We're in ZBrush. We're going to do this part in ZBrush just because I feel like if I need to tweak some of the softer forms, it's a little more organic to do it within ZBrush. So I kind of want to do the block out here and then transfer it to Max. So we're going to get started. Let's do it. We're going to start out with a cylinder. I'm going to just drag out a cylinder in the viewport, hit T to make it editable, F, fill the frame, and Shift and F to show the wireframe. I'm just going to back that out a little bit. You could see I'm facing front. There's a little head icon showing me the front of the face. I want to actually rotate this so that it's actually facing front. So I'm going to use the gizmo. I'm going to hold Shift to snap to 90 degrees, and there we go. We're now facing front. I'm also going to scale this up just a little bit, maybe to like that size, and then reset this gizmo so it's facing the right way. And that will now be the overall volume of like the cross section of the arm. So that's the first step in this process. What you want to do now and not forget to do is to make it a polymesh 3D. And we did that. And that'll make the rest of the steps go a bit more smoothly, because if you didn't, you'd have an issue. So we're going to use move. And what I'm going to do is hold Control and grab the arrow, drag that down, and that clones it. And I'm going to make that the first sucker that goes in this section. And I'm going to again hold Shift to snap that to 90 degrees as I rotate it. And what I'm going to do is based on the reference, scale this a bit and position it so that it works to my advantage to make this whole piece. So I'm not worried about the looping so much right now. We're going to Z-remesh this into one piece once we combine it. So I'm just trying to shoot for some basic proportions. And I noticed in the image that the longest sucker came up a little less than halfway up the actual arm. So I'm going to just try to match that a bit. Right there. Yeah, so that's a little less than the halfway mark. It's a little, you'll see right here, a little gap right there. That's what I want. I want that because when we put the one on the other side, we want them to have some space, some breathing room between them. And then the last thing I'm going to do is move this mostly to the front here. And again, I'm leaving a gap because we're going to tile this so that when it's flipped, there'll be the same amount of distance to the next sucker in that direction and so on as we tile it. So that's important. Okay, so now that we have the first sucker blocked out, we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to control and shift and drag it over to the other side. And what we want to do is pay close attention to where this hits. This point is about the same level as that. And you also don't want to have a ledge. Like you don't want any of this sticking out so there's a sharp edge there. And that looks good, so I'm happy with that. And then the next thing, I'm going to just fix the gizmo. We want to push it back. And what we want to do is, we're not going to use this whole length of arm. I'm going to actually scale it. We want to split this roughly halfway through what we see on the other side. So I'm seeing the whole thing, and then I'm going to the halfway mark like that. Because in the image I was looking at, it looks like they no more deviate than, like no more than a half of a tentacle or half of a sucker distance. So if we split this one, that one starts. And that's what I'm going to stick with for this tutorial. So now that's in a good position. It looks like it's intersecting the way I want. It's all good. And now what I'm going to do is Control Shift and click on the main arm. Actually, got to polygroup it first. So auto groups is just going to make these 3 different groups, even though they may look the same color, they're not. I'm going to just Control click this now. Control A to select it as a mask. And now I'm going to just hit Control and click to invert that mask. And now I want to just scale this. Let me just fix the gizmo. You don't need to, just a little OCD there. And what we want to do is scale this so that we have a gap here that's going to tile and be roughly twice, it'll be both of these sections added up will be the gap. And I think that looks good. So I'm happy with that right now. If we look at it, undo the masks, that's going to be our section that we're going to use to build out the rest of this. So right now, what we're going to do next is, right now, even though they're one subtool, they're separate pieces, and we want to combine that. So there's a good trick in Zbrush to do that. So what we're going to do is go to Scale or Move or Rotate and bring up this little gizmo. You see I have a Gizmo 3D and not the transpose line on, and the gizmo comes up, it has a gear. And if we use the gear, make sure nothing's masked, and we come to Remesh by Union, you can see it triangulates and attaches those. So that's one mesh now. And what I look out for is I don't want to see anything too crazy happening there, like nothing distorting really. And this is fine. And the cool thing is also it's making polygroups. So we have 3 separate polygroups. So I'm going to go to the faded gear there again and say accept. And now that we have that, we have the base, it's one mesh. We can remesh it. First thing I want to do though is go to Draw, Control, Shift, and click on the red section. And then I'm going to go down to polygroups. And I want to do group by normals. I'm going to just drop this to like 36, let's say, and see what happens there. That didn't do it. So a little bit lower. There we go. So what, 24.7, so 25-ish. And you can see we have 3 polygroups, and we're going to delete these end caps so that we can tile. So I want to just Control Shift and click in the viewport to bring everything back. And then I'm going to just go to the Z modeler brush and hover on a polygon, and I'm going to hit the space bar, and I'm going to say delete polygroup island, And then what I want to do is when I hover on a polygon, you can see it says delete polygroup island, but that orange line is pointing out towards the edge. We don't want that. We want it to point towards the next polygon, which it's kind of angled, but you can see it. So if you click it now, there we go. We get rid of it. And we'll do the same at the other end. So now those are gone. We want those gone. And now the next thing we're going to do is let's get out of that. I'll just go to standard, whatever. Control Shift click on the red. And then Control Shift click on it again to invert the selection. Sorry about that. I got a little sidetracked there with something. Okay. So now we want the bottom of these suckers to be a separate polygroup. So what I'm going to do is just lasso marquee with perspective off and hit Control W. And you can see now the bottom faces are red and the rest is purple. If you go above that line for the next polygroup, you come around the corner with it. You don't want that to happen. So just try to do like what I'm doing there. Control W. And you can see that's another polygroup. So now if we show it all, we're in good shape. We have separated polygroups, and that's going to help with the Z remesher. When you run Z remesher, the algorithm is going to consider the polygroups and know to keep some of these edges crisp. The next thing we're going to do is go to, let's see, to edge loop. Nope, sorry, crease. And we're going to say crease. And that's just going to get the hard edges and crease them. And that, again, will help the Z remesher make a better result. So right now, what I want to do is turn off Adapt in ZRemesh. I'm going to put on Detect Edges, Keep Groups, Smooth Groups. We're going to turn to 0. Reason being, if I leave it at 1, it may soften the transition between the sucker and the body of the arm, and also at the bottom. So I don't want that to happen, so I just turn that down. And I'm going to go with a poly count of like, I don't know, 2300 and just see what happens when I ZRemesh. And that's not bad. It's a little heavier than I would like for it to be as far as poly count. So maybe I'm going to try to half that now and see what happens. And now I'll try same. Undo those a couple times. Let's try it one more time. So maybe my base poly count could be a little better. So what I'm going to do is turn off same. And instead of the 2500 I used, I'm going to go to, let's try 12. And ZRemesh there and see what happens. I actually don't mind this. There's not a big deviation in the size of the polygons really, and we have some nice looping on these sucker arms. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to get rid of some of these edge loops on these suckers. I want to do something with the shape of them. So if you hover on an edge with the Z modeler brush selected, it's Insert Edge Loop. We're going to hold Alt and just click and remove all of these spans, with the exception if you have a span close to the body, let that stay. It just makes it easier to do what we're going to do. Same thing on the other side. And now when we hover, we're going to use Insert Edge Loop, turn it to Multiple Edge Loops, and turn on Interactive Elevation. And I'm going to click here and drag left and right to add like a little concave shape. And then I'm going to keep it held down, the mouse button, and drag up and down. And I think that looks good. That's like 5 segments. So now what I want to do is on the other side, if I just click on an edge and not drag, it'll apply the same settings. And there we go. So now I think right now what we have is a good base that we could send to 3D Studio Max. So what we're going to do is use Go Z, and we're going to just click the Go Z button, and it should send it to Max. And we're going to pick it up right when it gets into Max, okay? Okay, so now we're in 3D Studio Max. We're in 2023 just because my Go Z is set to go to there. I do have 2024, but I don't have it set up for that. And also I should note that I'm using ZBrush 2022.0.7 maybe. I haven't updated to the Maxon version yet just because I don't feel the features warrant the expense of upgrading. If they do something major and I'm impressed, I obviously will do it. But right now I just don't see doing it. So just a footnote there. Okay, so now in our viewport, if I turn on wireframe, you can see the same mesh, and you can see it's not like this shader that's blowing things out. I don't really want that. You could go in and use performance, which will gray it out. I kind of don't want to do that right now. So if I'm using standard, you can, in your listener here, you can type in, I'm going to just paste it, selection.material space equals space undefined. And if you hit enter, it strips off the material and you get the object color, which is right here. And it's now on the object. So it's a handy little trick anyway. And you can see it's got some shading artifacts, but that's going to all get fixed in a second. So now we have the base. And what we're going to do is above the edit mesh, I'm going to put an edit poly. And this is my first edit. And I'm just going to say, rename this and call it suckers. And this is where we're going to just modify the bottom of the suckers and make a better result for what we want to accomplish. So I'm going to go to polygon, and I'm going to click and go to the next polygon and control and double click. And that gives a ring selection of polygons. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Element, get rid of these two. And that's just going to give us the, this is going to accommodate us making a better version of the sucker, because the sucker has a really cylindrical and circular kind of thing going on, and the mesh we had wouldn't have accommodated that so well. So now if we go to border and I hit R for scale, I can shift and scale just like that. And then I'm going to shift and scale like this and move this up a little bit. I'm sort of free-forming to match what I see in the reference. I'm shift dragging that edge, so you can shift and drag. These are basic Max things. If you don't know about this stuff, then put in the comments the shift drag and all that, and I can do a quick basic overview on another video. So all I did was just shift drag the edge, scale it, and now in the middle of the sucker, it doesn't show in the reference I have, but there's a little, like almost like a P or a little dome shape, so I'm going to make that as well. So I'm going to just extrude outward, do this. I'm going to shift and scale, and then I'm going to collapse that, and then just maybe take these edges. I'm going to turn on the edge constraint, using shift and X, and if I use W, I can move this up and it gives a little more of a dome. And let's just go to open subdiv and take a look at what we have. You can see that's sort of like in the realm of what we see here. We're going to do a couple more steps though. So the first thing I want to do is turn off show end result. I want to, this span is kind of big, and we may want to, if we're going to sculpt it or something later, we want some density here. So I'm just going to swift loop a couple loops in just like that, and that'll make just like easier to deal with, and it's evenly spaced. So next thing I want to do is add a little in the reference. It's a little hard to see, but there's a rim around here and it's a little darker, and it's almost like this gets pushed in a little bit. So we're going to add a little bit of like something that adds some sort of organic feel to it. So first thing is I'm going to go to vertex subobject, select the center vertex, and here's a good Max trick. If you hold control and you go to selection, I'm going to say polygon, hold down control and click on that icon. It converts my vertex selection to a polygon selection, and then I'm going to grow that to here. And now what I want to do is shift and drag this up a little. Do that again. I'm not sure I like that. I must have, let's see. Oh, sorry, I have edge selection, edge constraint still on. So turn that off first. That would help. There we go. So that's what you want to do, is make a little lip, and that helps with how it's going to look. And then the next thing we want to do is swift loop, add a loop here. I'm going to scale that along the Z, just like that. And now I'm going to go to polygon, select the first one, control double click on the next one, and scale that with shift selected. And now that new ring of polygons, I want to relax it a little bit. It's too tight. So there we go. And now if I go up to open subdiv now, it's just a slight difference, but it kind of adds something more organic to it. So I like that. And now the same process we just did here, we're going to do the other side. So I'm going to quickly do that. Okay, so we're back. I did the second side. If we open subdiv, you can see it's very similar. And there we go. That's the base for the whole arm right now. The couple things we're going to do is just take a look at the mesh and see, like, are there any areas that are really troublesome? And for the tutorial, they're not really anything totally out of control. The next thing we want to do is above this suckers, we're going to put a new edit poly, and we're going to call that rename border check. And we're going to just check the count on the edges of the borders. Make sure end result's not on. I'm just going to go to border, select this, and we can see I have 52 edges. And this is straight from ZRemesher, and I have 52 at the other end. Now, if these were mismatched, you could find ways to like connect the loop. If the count's off, find a way to accommodate it. Don't worry so much about triangles. You don't want like ridiculous triangles that are long and stretched, but if you need to adjust the count, you usually can do something to make that happen. So the only thing I see that really I want to fix is the spacing right here, that the edges are a little bit long and then short on both sides. And maybe, I think that's it. I'm not going to go crazy. You could easily eliminate like what's going on here. You could do all that, but I'm not going to get into all of the subtleties. I may get rid of one edge right here though, just because I don't like it. So there we go. And you can see it divides. That's one subdivision. There's two. It's smooth. That works for me. So this is going to be the basis of the whole arm. So on the border check level, we just did that vert. And then what I want to do is maybe, let's do a little slide or something, or a cut. So I'm going to just come in here and use P-Connect. And let's see. I think maybe move a couple edges. Shift and X for edge constraint. We're just adjusting. I'm going to go to 1 for vertex and then just make an adjustment there. Okay. And now the spacing isn't terrible. I mean, here it is. We're going to fix that as well. But I want to really concentrate on the first loop of polygons where we're going to join things up. And that looks better than it did. So next thing is I'm going to go to 2 for edges. Ring select. I don't want to get involved. Well, let's try it. But you may not want to get involved with making adjustments like a spacing adjustment when you cross over the sucker. So let's just see what happens. It actually didn't affect anything that I wanted to keep. So if this got wonky, you would undo that and just select maybe the 2 edges here. But that's fine. So now the spacing's a little better there. And right here, I just want to do, I'm going to go cut. Do this. Maybe get rid of that with a backspace. I'm not like totally worried about all this stuff. You could totally do more than this and make it perfect. And funny enough, I'm known to really be a stickler for this stuff, but I think for this project, it's not totally necessary because the animation is going to be mostly the arm if we do animate. So feel free to make a better mesh. I'm known to make better meshes. You can look at my website and see wireframes. This is just me trying to show you how to do stuff. Assume this is perfect. So now if we just look at it, it looks good. Let's just check. So we have that same spacing issue here. And what I'm going to do is go to 2 for edge, select some edges, Shift and X, or just check the edge box for constraining. I'm going to go to 1 for vertex and just move these so that my first row on the opening is relatively even, except for down here it's going to tighten up, but that's fine. So that looks better. And the same situation we had on the other side we have here. So I'm just going to go cut this like that. And if you want to clean it up, you can. I'm going to just maybe go to target weld and maybe just do that one and move it a little bit. I'm not totally going to be concerned with all this right now. You can, again, this is just to show you the technique. It's good enough right there. I'm going to say it's good. So if we do the subdivision, it looks good. A little pinching. It's organic. We're going to add noise to it and stuff. I'm not worried about it being perfect right now. So there we have it. That's the first section. Now what we're going to do in the next little clip is join this into a bunch so we have like a long run and make an arm out of it. Okay, so let's just remove the open subdiv for the time being, just because we're going to clone this. We don't want them all to have the stack really ready to go. So I'm going to leave the rest of the stack for now. And what we're going to do is clone this. I'm going to just center the pivot as well. Make sure it's all in alignment. Center, align the world. It's good. And now make sure you don't have your edge constraint I left on before. Shift and X. And now what you want to do is just hold down Shift, drag, and leave a gap, a small gap between these. Just like that. I'm going to do 6 copies. And what we're going to do is make one section, and we'll probably clone that section like 5 times to make the full arm. Okay, so now we come back to the first one, add edit poly. We're going to call it attach 1. Okay, and now what we're going to do is just say attach. So I brought up the list And I'm going to just say all because that's the copies we just made. And that's good. So now next thing we want to do is these borders need to be attached. So I'm going to go border, select these two, and I want to just say bridge, right? So I'm going to click the bridge button, but I'm going to use the rollout, not just simply bridge them, because you can see there's an angle here, and we probably need to tick, yeah, if you tick this up or down, that's the rotation of the span, it'll fix it. And now because these are all copies, I'm pretty sure we should be able to just go across the board and select them, and they will work exactly the same, which they do, and say OK. And you have two options. You could select on the edge level, you could select the middle edge of each one of these and collapse like a ring of them. I'll do one, Alt and R, and then just say collapse. So that's one way to eliminate that tightness. We don't want a tight span after a bunch of bigger ones. The other thing you could do is just double click for a loop selection and control backspace that. I kind of like the result better when I do this, though. I'm going to just Alt ring, collapse. So you need to do this for whatever amount of times. And we're only doing it on the first one, really, and then subsequently anything that we attach from here on out, only the end seams will need to be done. And collapse. Okay, so I'm going to just really quickly stop. And when I come back, I'm going to just, the way I duplicated a single section, I'm going to duplicate this probably 5 or 6 sections and have them all attached. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. You can see I made 6 sections of the same section of 6 and attached them all. Let me just turn on I made a new edit poly for the second attachment. The first one was each little section, and this is each big segment. If I turn it off, that's 6 of those attached, okay? And you can see the little banding, but we're not going to worry about that. I think it's not a big deal, really. So now what we're going to do next, we have this whole run of arm. We need an end cap at one end because actually at the end of the arm, where it tapers down, it's not just a hollow piece, it needs a cap. So I'm going to go to the front viewport, and I'm going to just add a poly right now. End cap, we'll call it. Okay, and then what we're going to do is, we know that the borders are, well, I don't know if I did show that, but the borders were 52 edges each. So what I'm going to do now is go to sphere and pick around the center of the circle there, drag out a sphere, say 52. Okay, and now if I come here, it's at the wrong end, I want it at the other end. I'm going to just move it down here, zoom in, F4, and what you want to do is have the center line up with the end with a little bit of a gap. And I want to just adjust the radius so it's a little bit smaller so it fits within there. That's perfect. Convert that to edit poly. I'm going to polygon ring select so that click, control double click, delete. And now I'm going to go to element, select this one. I'm going to hit wireframe. If I control I to invert that selection and delete that. And now what I want to do is go to the arm and attach that sphere to the arm. So I'm going to just say attach it. Go to border selection, select those 2 borders. I'm going to bridge and tick this. There we go, that looks better. Say OK. And once again, ring select, Alt and R, and collapse. Okay, and hold on. So now we have an end to our arm. And you could probably, if you want to, let's just go into the last vert, the cap vert there. I select it. I'm going to do the trick where I hold control and convert to polygon. Grow that a bunch of times. And I'm going to just simply relax it just one little bit. Let me do one. Okay. And there we go. So now there's at least an end cap on that arm. Okay. So the arm is there. We don't have subdivision on it yet, but it probably looks longer than you think you need, but when you curve it around, it's actually going to need a decent amount of length. So we're going to taper it. When we taper it, we're going to also shorten it too. So that's the next step. Okay, so now above the stack, I'm going to do FFD 4 by 4 by 4. I'm going to hit the control points, go in, and I'm going to scale this down quite a bit. And I know you're probably saying, oh, you're screwing it up. No, I'm not, because even though these stretched, I can now move those same points to restore. I want to just, by eye, get this so it looks roundish again. Sort of round like that. And now I want to just keep this selected, grab the next group of points like that, and scale again. And now same deal, I want to move all of this back a little. So we're actually shortening some of that excess length that it looked like we had. And I think right now I'm pretty good with what I see. I might just do this one just a touch. Okay, so that's good enough. So now we have a taper to it, and it's a little more natural than it was before. The next step is we're going to make a path for it to follow so that we have the pose that we're seeing here or something similar to this. I'm not trying to make an exact replica of this. I'm just trying to show you how to make something that you can edit and make whatever you want out of. So we're going to be in the realm of this. So in the left viewport, let's do it in the left. I'm going to use splines. I'm going to go to freehand, and I'm just going to draw out the shape. Oops. Let's do it again. Sorry about that. It's the funniest thing. Whenever you make a mistake, you do it faster the next time. Okay, so that's about what I want, but because I did it freehand, I need to put an edit spline, and the reason being is if we look at the vertex count, it's a little high. Above that, I'm going to put an optimized spline and show knots, and now we want to just probably going to crank this value pretty high. And what I want to do is get these spaced out pretty reasonably so I can edit if I need to. And also, there might be a little bonus footage later where I'm going to do a trick with that. So I kind of like that. And I'm going to put an edit spline above this now. And just, I want to tailor this just a little bit more. So I'm going to move this vert, make a couple adjustments to what I have here. Let's move this closer. Yeah, see the curves are a little bit prettier now. This is something where if someone art directed what you're working on, you have the ability to do it. And I'm happy with that. So right now we're going to keep that as is. I'm going to save the file just because I haven't saved yet. And call it whatever. We're going to call it doc oc-009. It's just random. I did a few tests, but just so I know it's there. Okay, so now if we go back to the arm, we have the FFD in place. I'm going to say in the modifier stack, I want to add a path deformer, not patch, path deform world space modifier, and click that. And now you see it has a pick path button. I'm going to click that, and that looks like shit, right? So what happens is it initially will move it. You need to click the move to path button, and it still doesn't look right. Now these axes, path deform axis, until you find the one that's right. Once you do, you'll know. So there it is. It's for my instance, it's Y, and we can see it's going in the right direction too. So now if I wanted to get down more toward the end, you could see where I lost some of the length. Even though the spline appeared to be the same length as the arm, it's curving, so there's a lot more real estate covered. You can roll the percentage and do like this if you wanted to. And also if you wanted to make the arm longer, you obviously could probably double the length of what I had there. I'm going to back it out a little bit, kind of like this. I like that. Okay, so that appears longer and shows it off a little bit better. So now that looks good. There's still some stuff we need to do though. As you recall, these suckers twist around the mesh. They don't just face one direction. There is this twist value, but if you mess with it, it just twists them around all evenly, and I don't like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add twist modifier. And let's see. I got to show end result. There we go. And what we want to do is just we're going to do the twist value, and it's going to mess things up. That's just telling you this axis is not right. Don't freak out if you do things like the last step and this step. When the axis isn't what you need, it doesn't look right. But when it is, you see it works. So now I'm going to really crank this around a few times. And that's cool because look, we're starting out and then we come facing camera and then we face away, it twists around. That's really kind of like what was happening in this image. So that's kind of cool. And now that's looking pretty natural. And then the next thing I want to do is just add a little bit of noise to this. So I'm going to put a noise modifier and turn it to fractal, put the roughness to 1. And we're going to mess with the scale after I give a little bit of amplitude to it. So I'm just turning these strength values up a little bit in each direction. And don't overdo it and look at it from multiple angles. So let me turn the noise on and off. Yeah, I like that because it feels natural. It's not too, if this jutted out too much, it wouldn't look good. So that helps make it feel organic. And then we can mess with the scale of the noise. So you can see if I go too small, it's too busy. But I think it was a little too big when I started. I think somewhere in this realm is good. And I like that. Okay, so now we have a pose. We have the twist that we need and it's editable, and we have noise. So the good thing is the FFD, if you wanted to taper more or less, you could adjust. The twist you could adjust. The noise you could adjust. And the path to form, you could adjust the shape of the path as well. So if you were to go select the spline and pick a vert, let's get one, there we go, and move it, you can see we can adjust that as well. That's going to lead to some bonus footage later. But yeah, so there we go. We have all of this. Now, if we go back to the arm and we throw an open subdiv or turbo smooth, I kind of like sticking with the open subdiv. You throw it on top and now it's kind of clean looking. It looks organic. And it's a great, I would say this is a great mesh to use. You could bring this back to ZBrush and sculpt it and finesse the edging and the loops and stuff a bit more. It's not terrible. This is out of ZRemesher. This is mostly ZRemesh and me doing a little cleanup. Now what you can see, this is actually good. This little distortion here, that's from the spline. So if I come back and I go to vertex, this is important actually. We're going to select all the verts in the edit spline and convert them to Bezier. They may not be perfectly set to, they may be corners or something. So I'll right click and say Bezier, and that fixed it. And you could also, if they were impeding on each other, they would do the same thing that they were just doing. You could see that cleaned up. You could space them and do things to clean that up. So the spline is how you remove some of that compression, okay? So all that said, I'm going to do one more section of video where we're going to do the bonus footage. Okay, so this is the last part of the video, for today at least. And the way I was able to edit the spline, and you notice that this adjusted, first of all, you could make 8 arms and have them each do different things and twist and taper in different ways just because of the editability of the actual arm having the stack intact. And then the other thing you could do is if you wanted to, with the spline here, collapse that to edit spline, collapse to, and then we're going to just do this briefly, and I can't promise it'll be amazing, but it'll show you some potential. I'm going to hit auto key, set a keyframe at 0, go to 100. I'm going to grab some verts, maybe the end ones here, and I'm just going to move those a little bit. Maybe grab something out this way. Do something like this. Okay, and then I'm going to turn off auto key. Let's just see. It's very minor, but you can go further than I'm going, and you could also go further along the path. Like if you were in the middle here, you could adjust these points and have something cool happen. So let's go back to 100 really quick. Turn on the auto key. And maybe this more. Just want to give you something good in the bonus footage. Okay. So now if we turn off auto key, that should be a little more motion than the last one was. You get the idea. I'm not an animator, but if you have experience moving splines around and you play around with this, you could definitely, if you had a shot where a tentacle, octopus arm came into frame and you needed to just do something basic, this would be a quick way to do it, and you could art direct it quite a bit. So with that said, I think this is in a good place. If you like what you saw today, please like and subscribe below. And if you like this tutorial in general, I could easily show a tutorial where I unwrap and substance painter this, and even another video where I would do, say, a render with V-Ray and some subsurface scattering. So please comment, show support, and I'll see you in the next video.